Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Weldon Witness, Bookworm, Film Geek, and Friend. I'm William McGinn, and for starters, I wanted to I'm basically reintroducing my book again, but the reason that I'm talking about it again is at the end I wrote something. I decided to include a message at the very end of the book after the story, because I got the idea while I was editing the first draft of this story and I was mentioning the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in it, and I figured I'm putting real life into this, so I'm going to be reading aloud what I hope you've taken away from my series if you ever read it. And I'll be reading straight from it, and this is my words, not the words of Riot Radio or anyone else, just mine. So it starts like this. Paige Katika honestly did not live the worst life ever. There are families and orphans everywhere who get by on $1 a day. People around the world are subjected to more pain, torture, and humiliation on a daily basis than Paige. Also, the Vangers, which are the bad guys in my book, basically are a group of flunkies who maybe didn't study hard enough to get a satisfactory income, or couldn't hold their temper in a situation and as a result got their lives and credibility tossed into the shredder. Well, everyone has a story of how they got to be who they are. Everyone has gotten mad at something unfair. The message that I'm sending is that pretty much everyone, and I mean everyone, can grow up to be a Vanger, a terrorist. Nobody becomes a criminal because they got an F on a pop quiz, for example, but if they are ignored about their say on if the F is dishonest, or if there's not a valid reason for the F, then that kid just might feel the same desire as the world's worst criminals. If Paige had the weapons to kill in the first book, she probably would have used them. And then would she be seen as a hero? Do you think she's a hero? And have you ever experienced that? Have you ever experienced that some real anger over something because you were ignored or you were bullied? The message I hoped to bring when I was 11 years old and wrote the first book was that destroying or damaging someone else's property is not funny and is intolerably cruel. And it always will be. I'll never understand how anyone could think of vandalism as funny. The message I bring now as an 18-year-old is, if someone punches another person, if you or your kid end up skipping school, if someone is angry and warns that they will do something horrible, don't treat them like second class. Don't say they're babies. Don't say they have to grow up and move on. That'll only make it worse. Listen to what they have to say, and don't punish them to the point their hatred will simply rise. Agree to disagree. Have a friendly debate. If you ever feel this way, talk to someone who understands the real you, a friend, a responsible parent, or a caring therapist. Being ignored, bullied, or disrespected in any way can create a monster. Of course, there are some unforgivable things done in this world. We live in a complicated, angry, and vicious one, so we might as well do our best to dilute that by being as happy, as forgiving, and as loving as possible. Otherwise, what are we doing with our lives, really? So that's the message that's at the back of the book, and I hope that I hope that you feel it rings true for you, and I hope that whoever reads it is inspired to be a nicer person to everyone they meet, and is willing to understand where everyone comes from in an argument. So we're going to take a small music break, but after it, I'm going to be talking about, actually, this time we'll be doing a book tag. I'll explain what that is later. And if we have time, then I'll be discussing some movies that I couldn't discuss last time because we were cut short. And then we'll be talking about some movies related to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themselves. Okay? All right. I'll see you after the break. Hey guys, we're back again. So I always talk about a certain movie or book genre, but for book genres this time, instead we're going to do this special book tag, or you could call it book challenge. A lot of booktubers who are basically YouTubers who love books, a lot of them have done this challenge. It's been around for a while. It's basically where you say your unpopular opinion. That's why it's called the Unpopular Opinion Book Challenge. So I basically answer 7 main questions. And the first one is, a popular book or series that you didn't like. And after a lot of it thought, I have to go with the Fifth Wave trilogy by Rick Yancey. I have only read the first two, and I'm dreading the time where I'm going to have to pick up the last star. I read the Fifth Wave, and I could see where Rick Yancey was coming from. I could see that he really enjoyed himself writing this book, but his feeling of suspense just didn't register to me as a reader. And I like The Infinite Sea even less. You might know this from a few videos back, but The Infinite Sea is one of the worst books I've read in a long time. It's gonna probably be my least favorite book I've read in 2017. The Fifth Wave is basically just a big apocalypse book about the population wiped out, and there are some clever ways that it shows how these people had perished without electricity or running water, with disease, with floods, and then even with people turning against each other because they don't know who the aliens are. But the delivery just didn't show in this book. And in The Infinite Sea, there's a cliffhanger from the Fifth Wave where all these little kids are captured and sent to this place called Wonderland. And The Infinite Sea doesn't even really acknowledge this. And that cliffhanger was the reason I picked up The Infinite Sea. So basically, yeah, I don't care for the Fifth Wave trilogy. The next one is a popular book or series that you love but everyone else seems to hate. And we have a tie here. First of all, there's the No One Else Can Have You series by Kathleen Hale. I've mentioned this. Oops, sorry, the microphone. I've mentioned this series before, and I wanted to go more in depth about why it's not really liked. And the truth is, it's sort of unfair. As a critic, it's our job to give our personal opinions. But this book, No One Else Can Have You, is Kathleen Hale's debut, and she accidentally didn't stay off of a review channel called Goodreads. And she caught wind of a reviewer named Blythe, who rated her book 1 star, saying that it endorses rape, and that that all of these people are just maniacs. It's basically a murder mystery. And then Kathleen Hale felt, but there isn't rape in my book. And all of a sudden, all these reviewers were saying, yes, Blythe, actually, I like the book, but I'm going to bring my ratings down for this. And so Kathleen went into a bit of a depression, and then went so far as to see if she could contact Blythe personally. So she ended up asking some people around, and she got Blythe's address. She just wanted to talk to her about this. And when Kathleen put up an article in The Guardian called Am I Being Catfished? An author confronts her #1 book critic. A lot of people said that she was stalking the reviewer, and a lot of people said, I am never reading this before ever again. Stalking a reviewer is not okay. Well, as both an author and a critic at the same time, I related to both sides, but personally, if an author or filmmaker had read a review that where I didn't like their product and they wanted to talk to me, then I gladly would. I know that's not the same for every critic, but it convinced me to read No One Else Can Have You for myself, see if this all was right. And I loved the book. It was a terrific mystery and everything. So it's tied with this series, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. And I'm going to be talking about this in a future project, so stay tuned. It goes from Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs to Hollow City to Library of Souls. A lot of people have mixed reactions about this series, and I have no idea why. It has so much adventure. It has such unforgettable characters. These characters feel like my family now, and they have been ever since I read this book in 2016. I was going to watch the movie that had just came out and Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children had been on my bookshelf for about a month, and I figured I have to read it, or just try to read it. So the day that I was expecting to, I put away all of my studying and read the first book, see if I could read as much of it as I could before we saw it, and I ended up devouring the whole thing in just 2 days. We didn't end up seeing that movie that day, but that was beneficial because I loved the book. There's a booktuber called Jesse the Reader, and it's his favorite book of all time. I could really see it. It has a good mystery, and also the main character, Jacob Portman, he feels like a lost little kid who's just realizing his full potential. I'll go into it a bit later in another episode. So then there's an OTP that you're not a fan of, basically a relationship you're not a fan of. And I thought about Rebecca and Luke from Confessions of a Shopaholic, or Sophie Kinsella's Shopaholic series. I don't know. I read this book and the second one, Shopaholic Takes Manhattan, and just Luke's really not my type. He seems to be he seems to want to be right all the time, and he does some stuff in Confessions of a Shopaholic that, well, I wouldn't be so quick to forgive. He then learns that he did a little bit of stuff that just was more for his company rather than for people, and so he changed things up. And in Shopaholic Takes Manhattan, he doesn't end up showing up to this certain party that Rebecca promised he'd be at, and honestly, there ends up being a logical explanation, but in the end I still just didn't really ship the couple. I'm sure that Rebecca could do better. There's also the couple from Warcross by Murray Liu, Amika Chen and Hideo Tenka. Now I just finished this book 2 days ago and I loved it. And I guess the reason that I didn't ship them was Hideo Tenka was a big multi-billionaire, and he's basically the first guy Amika's age in the book that she has contact with. It's not the first boy she has contact with in her whole life, but you get what I mean. I guess maybe I was still suffering from another movie series that basically stands for FSOG that made me a little tired of the outsider girl meets billionaire guy. This reminded me a bit of that, but thankfully that was their positions was the only thing that reminded me of it. The next one is a popular book genre that you hardly ever reach for, and I'm gonna have to go with romance. I know in my second episode I mentioned romance and I gave a thorough explanation of why I don't ever reach for that. I even said that I looked through my archives of reviewing and looked for any books that seemed centered on romance specifically, and there were no books that had a cover of just two people just talking. You know, that I guess those just don't really draw me in. And the reason that I don't is because, well, I've already been through stuff like these characters are feeling, and so as a result, it just doesn't seem like I'll enjoy it. I'll always think about my own relationships and do a comparison and just don't see them as big of a deal. Next up is a popular or beloved book character that you didn't like. And I'm going to have to go with Kaz from the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. I'm sorry, I don't have a copy with me right now, but basically Six of Crows is, as I said, a duology. The first book, which is the only one I've read, is about these 6 people who end up like misfits who end up on their own journey to try to steal this person who's being kept in this big compound that could lead to that has information that could lead to disaster across the Grisha universe. And the main leader is a guy named Kaz Brecker, and well, he's really kind of unforgivable. He's brutal and a crook, and while I like to see some edge in some protagonists, and I like the rest of the crew is great. I'd love to hang out with all of them, except Kaz does something that's kind of unforgivable. Basically, in the middle of the voyage, he ends up taking someone hostage that was trying to shoot at them, and to persuade him to give out information, he cut his eyes out and then promised to drown him if he didn't give out information. And this guy did give the information, but he did it anyway. And he also ends up really breaking his enemies' backs a little too much. It becomes a little unrealistic, and it's basically excruciating to endure. I wouldn't want Kaz to be anywhere near me. But yet a lot of people really seem to like him for a reason I can't really figure out. Next is an author I can't seem to get into, and I guess that would be both Leigh Bardugo, who made Six of Crows, and Sally Green. I've only read one of... Oh, wait, sorry. I meant Sally Green and Colleen Houck. I'll do Sally Green first since I just mentioned her. She's the author of the Half Bad trilogy, and I've only read Half Bad, but it seems like her writing style is just not my type. She zooms past a little too many details. Like one minute this character was escaping from this prison that we actually really want him to escape from. Sally Green managed to make us really understand the cruelty of this universe, and then the next page it takes place 10 days later, and his character is basically explaining what he's doing rather than really exploding with emotion on how he's finally free after years. What I would have done is really have a moment where the character cries, where his hands are shaking, because I feel like he felt that, and Sally Green knew it, but she didn't share it effectively enough. A lot of stuff happens in Half Bad, and as a result, if I was writing that book, it would probably have been 600 pages. For her, it was 400. But it went too fast for me. And as for Colleen Houck, I've mentioned her before. She's the author of the Tiger's Curse cycle and the Reawakened trilogy. And well, I hated Tiger's Curse and felt Reawakened was pretty much just so. I didn't hate it, but still really just wanted it to end a lot. These covers are incredible, though. I guess Colleen Houck's stories are just way too slow for my taste. I feel like she spends a lot of time getting the characters to every single place they need to go, and focuses a little too much on the romance when she seems to know that she has a very good story in mind that could have been fast-paced but isn't. So she's basically not really my type of author. This is the second last one. A popular book trope that you're tired of seeing. That would be the main character being the chosen one. I hated F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, but something that I admired about it was the fact that Nick Carraway, someone who had nothing to do with the relationships other than being the one who knew both Gatsby and Daisy personally, was the one narrating it. I feel like I want a book where the characters are pretty ordinary and caught up in this mess, and I don't know, just being the chosen one for each one, I've gotten a bit tired of it personally. I guess when you read many YA books, you want something a little different, maybe even something a little bit more realistic. I don't know. Maybe, come to think of it, if a queen was under attack, then she would probably be the proper one to tell the story, but still. And lastly, a book where the movie is better. And I'm going to have to go with The Maze Runner, 100%. I love the Fifth Wave movie, but the Maze Runner movies, they hold everything. They hold all the cards. They have all the action, all the horror. You could basically say they're the first horror movies, apart from Jaws, that I ever saw. They were sensational. They were frightening and well acted and storytelling at their finest. And there was never a moment where I was bored. And so I think that we have enough time, as long as I go fast, to talk about the biography movies that I thought were bad, the ones that I was going to talk about last time. So last time I mentioned Sully, which I gave a C- to. So now we're going to go to another Clint Eastwood adaptation of a real-life event. Have you heard of American Sniper? It came out December 2014, and then in Canada it was sent out in January, so I was allowed to put it on my worst of the year of 2015 list. It was horrifyingly bad. It was basically the story of Chris Kyle, a U.S. Marine or Navy SEAL, I think it was Navy SEAL, who over the course of his years on the job had killed more people than any other solo Navy SEAL. And admittedly, the real Chris Kyle was happier about taking the lives of people he deemed evil, and this Chris Kyle, played by Bradley Cooper in the movie, is not that insane, so there's that. And so like this Chris thinks a little bit about the kills he does. So that's about the only good thing I can say about this movie. So look, for starters, I'm very sorry to Taya Kyle, Chris's wife, for losing her husband. That must have been devastating for you. And I hope that she and her family have the best future possible. But right now we're talking about the movie, and it's one of the worst I've ever seen. Like, I found problems on basically each minute. For starters, apart from this 9/11 footage, which is way too cliched a reasoning at this point, and a poster about someone that we don't know in the film who had gotten beheaded by some terrorists, and we don't get to know and care about all these people anyway. Apart from those two things, there is no other reason shown why Chris and all of these Navy SEALs are over there. And when you're talking about doing a biography of the one who killed the most people, then that's an issue. And so as a result, when Taya Kyle gets very sad about Chris being away for so long, apparently these missions take like 6 to 9 months at a time. Like, she feels like Chris isn't there for her and her children, and we can't help but sympathize with her, and we feel like Chris's missions are unimportant. The antagonist doesn't really feel like a threat to Chris himself either. We basically know nothing about him. I don't even remember his name. I barely even remember what he wore during his last scene. And so the so-called antagonist has little to no development that you could call him cardboard. The action has poor choreography because half the time I couldn't even tell where the shots were coming from as they were being fired. And Bradley Cooper's acting also feels fake and wan, in my opinion. And there are 3 supremely low points in this film. For starters, this guy from somewhere in Iraq or Iran invites the Navy SEAL in to dinner, to hide something, of course, but he invites them into dinner. Okay, come on, like that, I don't know if that would really happened, but I'm pretty sure that did not happen in real life. Do you really think that someone would just invite these soldiers who pointed guns at them to dinner? There's also when Chris is about to have his first child, he says to Taya, "I know it's a boy." And then when he's on his mission and on the phone to her, Taya says, "Yes, it's a boy." And Chris and his entire fleet cheer hooray. I had a problem with that. That's sexist. I mean, maybe that's how men work, but I really felt that was out of place for a film depicting a hero. And 3, it doesn't show a character death at the end that I was kind of excited for. It wimps out and says, and just says it at the very end in biography format. So long story short, F. Then there's also the Monuments Men and Suffragette. I'm not going to talk about them too as in detailed, but basically the Monuments Men is about men risking their lives to save priceless works of French artifacts that the Germans were trying to get rid of to destroy other cultures. It's not something I'd say lives are worth, but if they want to make a movie of this, okay. I was drawn into it because Matt Damon, who played Ryan in Saving Private Ryan, was at the very front of the movie poster. So I was excited, but I remember next to nothing about that movie. I can't give an in-depth review, but it was just so boring. I was probably asleep for most of it. So that gets an F too. I don't give many Fs, but it's hard for me not to give an F if I can't stay awake for a movie. And Suffragette, lastly, is about the women who did their best to have a right to vote. They said that they were half of the people of the entire world, and they have to have a say in it. They were exactly right. And the movie does a good job of showing us the horrors that they went through. As a result, it's kind of hard to watch, but at the same time, they do all of these crimes to get the media's attention because men will only focus on violence, and they get themselves caught and in jail way too easily. I felt like I wanted a bit more of a chase. I wanted them to be in hiding a little bit more. And what could have made it all worthwhile was a good ending. But just like American Sniper, it stops when it gets good and just resorts to text format. And that, in my opinion, was not okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you another break now. And when we get back, we're going to be discussing turtle power and pizza like you might have never heard before. So stay tuned. Hi, we're back. So, I'm going to be talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, I first found out about them when I was like 8, and but I didn't really get into them. And then I was watching a video by WatchMojo.com. It was the 10 best computer animated movies not made by Pixar. Kung Fu Panda was the second on the list, and they said that we haven't had this much fun since the Ninja Turtles. And well, because I was surfing, I decided to look them up, and I found out about how they were originally a comic, and then I looked at their cartoon that began in 1987, and I fell in love with it instantly. I love the personality of each one. I love the colorfulness of the show. I am a sucker for 80s television shows. Their organicness really makes me laugh, and I liked how the Turtles were comfortable with just being who they were, and so that's something that I don't think is around much. So as a result, I went cowabunga and decided to watch the movies. So if you don't know, there are 6 movies that have been theatrically released as of 2017. There were 3 live-action movies from in the 90s, a CGI film from 2007, and these ones you probably know, 2 brand new movies that came out in the last 3 years. And I'm going to be talking about all of them because I have an opinion on all of them. I mean, of course I do. So the first movie was way back in 1990, and Jim Henson had made the puppeteers for the Turtles. Normally, you would use like Autodesk Maya or Blender to animate these turtles, but like the Muppets, he created these animatronics for the turtles. He had to invent basically 20, or I don't even know, but he basically had to invent so many different techniques to get these turtles just right to make them move properly on their own. And well, and what's the story? Well, I think it transcends territory between kids movie and teens movie rather effectively. For example, the Foot Clan is gathered by a group of teenagers who probably feel really just like outsiders, like the world doesn't understand them, so they have to have the Shredder and the Foot Clan as their family. Like, they smoke and place the skateboard inside and have these big arcade machines and everything. Who knows what else they do? I don't know. The movie's not too graphic about it. So anyway, April O'Neil is investigating this clan about how these levels of crimes are really increasing across New York, and then she ends up one way or another into the Turtles' lair because she gets attacked by the clan as she is trying to report on them. And then the Turtles, well, their master Splinter ends up getting abducted by this clan, and so they have to do their best to try to get him back. So the reason that I really love this part, that I really love the first movie, is actually because of a specific character, and it's not any of the Turtles, it's not April, it's not Splinter, it's not even Casey, who is a terrific guy played by the terrific Elias Koteas. It's actually a kid named Danny, who's the son of April's boss. You see, he steals, and he's part of the clan, and yet his father makes more than enough to provide for both of them. Danny feels like his father doesn't love him enough, but the truth is he really does. I guess Danny feels like his father wouldn't understand the way what he likes, and also, when Danny decides to reveal the location of the Turtles when he figures something out, afterwards, we get a shot of him, and he feels really guilty about it. I feel like everyone could relate to Danny about regretting something wrong they've done and feeling confused and hurt about the world around them. Now for the sequel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Secret of the Ooze. The Turtles actually don't use their weapons in this one because apparently families were very upset about this from back in 1990, which is kind of laughable considering how much violence kids are exposed to today. But the point is they shelved them to their belts and their backs. And the movie opens, honestly, to a very delicious and literally cheesy opening. Like, everyone is eating pizza. It gets you hungry for it pretty instantaneously. simultaneously. And the turtles still have as much charm as ever. And this pizza delivery guy, or like Kung Fu guy named Kang, I think that's what his name is, he's a nice little addition to the team. Basically, whenever the turtles are on set, it's fun. But something that I had a problem with was dumbing down Shredder a little bit. He doesn't seem as fierce as before. And also, the Splinter that we have in this one, he got saved like just a little while ago by the turtles, and yet he is strangely strict. He's strangely obtuse and cynical, and doesn't allow the turtles to go in certain places. And I felt that was backwards. It seemed like he had amnesia or something. And that really made the movie go a lot lower for me. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't really like authority figures. I'm 19 years old now. It was just my birthday on Sunday, and I might always distrust adults. Well, so did Roald Dahl, admittedly, so who knows? And there's also the fact that Vanilla Ice's Go Ninja Go is a very cherished song. But I'm not the biggest fan of rap in general. It's just me. If you like Vanilla Ice's song, then that's perfect. Just for me, it wasn't my type. It once again seemed to make it a little bit silly, and the seriousness of the first film seemed to be lacking here. And so I gave the first film a B+. I have to give this one a C. I'm sorry. But then there's the third one that came out in 1993, Turtles in Time. This one, a lot of people say is the worst one, but I don't think that. It's basically about a magic scepter that has time travel powers to feudal Japan. It basically, whenever two people who have the same weight are holding it in a different timeline, then they switch places. I feel like that is actually good science fiction. And so April ends up accidentally going there right when she's about to go on vacation, and so the turtles follow her there. And there they meet this clan who, they're obviously a little freaked out by the turtles. The turtles have had to live their entire lives like knowing that people are scared of them. But in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, they get to start all over. And as a result, I really felt like the time travel was a good idea. It allowed the turtles to be more open and really kicking butt. And also, Michelangelo and Raphael developed feelings for these two characters, and it was the sweetest part of this entire trilogy, in my opinion. Just second next to Danny and his father. And the ending really made me conflictual about what the right thing was to do. And there was a decent antagonist too, played by, I think it was Stuart Walker. I don't know, but then the Japan setting really gave it a mystical feel. So I ended up giving it an A-. And now then 14 years later, there was a CGI film directed by Kevin Munro in 2007 titled TMNT, which is a good acronym, really. It's like TNT, but with TMNT. And that does have a good atmosphere for the film. This film is pretty serious, but I felt it was just too serious. I had a big problem with it right at the start because apparently Leonardo has been away for an entire year in South America training. I don't really know why he was training because they already beat the Shredder in this universe. And now just except for Michelangelo, everyone has just had enough of the party. And Kevin Munro said that he could get that people might want a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon to be funny, but he wanted to show that there can be darkness in a cartoon. Well, there was too much here, and it was just no fun. I liked the Mikey skateboarding scene, but it took itself way too seriously. And also, a fun fact is Leonardo's not my type. I don't really like him as a character. He seems a little too similar to Splinter. I know some people who say Leo is their favorite. That's perfectly fine. I don't mind that at all. I just felt like Leonardo was too demanding and didn't see logic, and it got so bad that when Leonardo and Raphael are on the top of this building fighting, like, I actually wanted Leo thrown off the building. That's how angry he made me. And a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie shouldn't make me angry. It should make me happy that these turtles are back. But I ended up giving it a C-. It has good animation, admittedly, but its story just seemed a little messy and just not there, really. So now I'm going to be talking about the two most recent movies. These ones, if you remember, they were very controversial when they started. For one, Michael Bay was going to produce it, and he said that the turtles would be aliens. And two, he casted Megan Fox as April O'Neil right after Megan Fox called Michael Bay Hitler, which caused her to be removed from Transformers: Dark of the Moon. And a lot of people were enraged about these two things. I wasn't sure if the Ninja Turtles being aliens would be good either, but I was willing to go with the benefit of the doubt. I promised myself I wouldn't hate until I saw the final production. And I also thought that that was sweet that Megan Fox got cast. I think that she's a very underrated actress. I think that she really has talent, and she displayed it in the Transformers movies very, very, very well. And she displays it even better here in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. She feels like a good reporter that is underused, and the movie has a lot to do with her. And near the end, she ends up yelling to Shredder that she has all that's left of this certain mutagen. Like, it's a turtle movie, of course it has to have mutagen somewhere. But yeah, basically Megan Fox was great in it. So, and next, I thought that the story was okay. It seemed to be stuck in origin story mode a little bit, but its action scenes felt almost like a roller coaster, going upside down and in corkscrews and inside out. I really liked that, considering how long I was waiting for this movie, it did that. And also, I had an okay reaction to the turtle designs. They are still the same turtles that we grew up to love, and they have a lot to carry on their shoulders. Like, Donatello wears like both glasses and a microscope and a big satellite dish on his back end. It still makes him really great. And there's also a terrific snow scene that I could rewatch dozens of times and not get tired. And there's also an ending that is really sweet. Funny and sweet at the same time. And Splinter says something at the end that really touched a nerve with me. I really liked that he said that, and it really opened up possibilities for a sequel everywhere. So it's a very good thing that we got a sequel, because this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of 2014 ended up being the highest grossing Nickelodeon movie ever. So of course they went with a sequel. This one is called Out of the Shadows, and I have a little bit more to say on this. So the Turtles feel like they need to have a bit of more of an identity in this world. They saved New York, and so they feel they should be credited a little bit. Leo thinks it's okay. Like, we know that we did it, so it's okay. We live up. Like, whenever they watch a basketball game, they are in the actual scoreboard, and that anyone else can watch from down there. So, but anyway, Shredder has escaped from jail, and he's mutated these two prison lunkheads, Bebop and Rocksteady. Anyone who's a big Turtle fan knows who these are, and with the help of Baxter Stockman, and then April ends up also meeting Casey Jones, and together they basically have to stop Shredder once again. But then they see that they might have a chance to become human. And I was very surprised when I saw this. I didn't see the trailer where that was introduced. So I was supremely excited for this. And so, for starters, my initial reaction was a B+, the same that I gave the first movie, but then I ended up thinking about it so much that my grade was brought up to an A, and it became my number 4 favorite movie of 2016. There's just so much to talk about, so much to think about. And also, for starters, I wanted to discuss Bebop and Rocksteady. They are a little loud in this movie, and a little bit gross, really, but so one critic called them the cutest movie couple of the year, and I can't disagree. They grow on you. You begin to like them more as they're in the movie. They're really overacting, and you feel like their overacting is what Bebop and Rocksteady would do. They keep saying, "My man." Hope that was a good representation. So what else is there? Oh yeah, and And there's a conflict about whether they turn human or not, and it turns into some of the saddest moments in the Ninja Turtle universe. If you think you're too cool for a movie starring pizza-eating turtles, get over it. Out of the Shadows is a very human movie, and the turtles have to turn on each other a little bit too, and it is an interesting conflict. Once again, I don't side with Leo. I thought Leo was a jerk in this movie, but he was an interesting jerk is what I would call him. And also, the turtles, I like their design a little bit more in this one. They're basically the same, but in the 2014 one, I felt like Michelangelo was a little too in your face and a little bit tawdry, even though he was still the Mikey we grew up and loved. In this one, he even seems a little more handsome and a little bit more fun to be with. And I don't know. I don't know what the animators did. The turtles just look a lot better. These are the sort. This is the sort of animation that the pause button on your remote was made for. And lastly, the end credit song, which, if I'm not wrong, is going to be playing in about 4 minutes, is one of the best end credits I've ever heard. So, but before we end, I wanted to say this. Out of the Shadows did not make as much money as they anticipated, and I don't know why. It was advertised perfectly, in my opinion. But apparently it made so little money. It still made like $110 million above its budget, but compared to the first one, that wasn't as good. So far there haven't been any plans for a third movie, even though the actors were signed on for 3 films and there was plans to do a third film. It even shows in the movie, a movie that had an ending that really made me smile for hours. So that made me furious. There's a difference between the entertainment world and the business world. It can be aggravating when you love a movie so much and then people just decide it's not worth spending money on, even if you could lower your budget a little bit to make it. If say the FSOG trilogy and and Spider-Man can get so many reboots, then surely something as amazing as this can. But one thing I will mention is there's a video game, I think it's a video game anyway, called Injustice 2, and there's this third fighter pack video. I don't know what a fighter pack is, and I don't know what Injustice is really, so don't quote me on this. But there were trailers that just came out like 3 or 4 days ago, and it featured the Ninja Turtles. I even watched a reaction video, and everyone clapped at the first 2, but when the Turtles came into view, everyone was jumping out of their seats, yelling and clapping. It goes to show how much the Ninja Turtles really have impacted a lot of people, including me. So who knows? Maybe one day we'll see more of the Turtles. I hope we do, because Out of the Shadows really upped my expectations. So that's everything, and I hope you enjoyed another episode of Weldon Witness, Bookworm, Film Geek, and Friend. As usual, you can see Riot Radio on Twitter and Instagram at DCSI Riot Radio, and I'm William McGinn, and I'm excited to see you next week. See you then. Bye.